All right. So in the last video, we got a basic understanding as to what this project is going to, what we're going to achieve in this project, what we're going to build, and there are a lot of things. Okay, if you see that are happening parallelly. Okay, uh, if I right now, if I look at the architecture, okay, one thing that I understand is the entry point. Okay, wherein I'm just going to use the main.py file, and main.py file is where I'm going to trigger my API backend server, okay, which are the entry points to my project or to my pipeline. And basis that, what happens is there are a couple of things that get triggered simultaneously. For example, if you see here, fast API server is going to trigger my RAG workflow. In this case, we are building an agentic RAG, and hence we are building on depending on LangGraph. Then it kind of hits the video processor, which downloads the video and which indexes it. This indexed video will be stored in Azure Blob Storage. Okay, and Azure Blob Storage takes care of or stores unstructured data, right? Um, After that, we're also there's, if you look at the orchestration layer, there's also a retrieval engine. Okay, and it is going to retrieve from the embeddings in that are LLM and embeddings that are going to generate. So it is going to embed the data or the relevant vectors from using the Azure OpenAI piece. Okay, and whatever response gets generated, that goes to the compliance auditor. And now if you see on the right side, there is a lot of to and fro happening with the Azure Infra or the managed part. Okay, wherein see whatever video was there, it got downloaded, it got indexed, and it got stored on blob storage, right? At the same time, this video was also processed using something called as Azure Video Indexer. Okay, um, it performs OCR as well as transcript, and basis that it generates insights, and those insights are given back to the processor. Okay, my retrieval engine is going to query the Azure AI search, which is going to store all my vectors. Okay, and then it will basically retrieve the data along with using the LLM. Okay, if you look at the external intelligence part, there is YouTube video. Obviously, this is the video uh, that acts as a source, right? This is where we're going to pass the YouTube URL, the URL of the brand advertisement. And if you see here, it is given as an input inside the LangGraph workflow, and then the video gets processed, then it gets uh, indexed, then it gets downloaded and indexed, then it gets stored in the blob storage. It gets processed, insights are generated, basis the query we're going to retrieve. And then you also have Azure Application Insights, which are typically used for logs and metrics purposes. And we also have Langsmith debugging and tracing part. Okay. Now, as of now, you might have a basic idea of the project. Okay. Now, slowly and steadily, as we start building the components, you will start getting the idea in much more in depth. All right. But if you see, there were a couple of Azure components that we discussed, right? So Azure components that we discussed were, let's say, one was storage account, right? This storage account, if you can see in the architecture again, this is nothing but the blob storage, right? Which is going to store the temporary video, the URL that we're going to paste. This URL will be converted, or will the you're going to download the video, right? Basis the URL that you give, that video gets downloaded and gets saved as temp video. This temporary video, the brand advertisement, gets stored in Azure Blob Storage. Okay, so it works, or you can think of this as a secure hard drive in the cloud where you can store unstructured data, and that is blob storage account. Okay, you can store your images, you can store your videos, you can store your PDFs, all of the unstructured data here. Okay, and we're going to use this as temporary holding area. It is going to hold the videos that we're going to that we're going to push in blob storage. Okay, and we save the MP4 file here. So we're going to use the brand video, right? So we're going to store or save this MP4 video here first, so the video indexer can process it and access it. Okay, so we also have something called as Azure Video Indexer, right? What is Azure Video Indexer? Okay, this Azure Video Indexer service, okay, it's nothing but firstly it uses computer vision and it also uses speech processing. All right, it uses what? It uses computer vision and it uses speech processing in order to analyze the video files. Okay, now what is that video file? This video file is nothing but the brand advertisements that you're going to put. Okay, it is going to extract faces, it is going to extract emotions, it is going to extract spoken words, it is going to do all of that, right? That is what it does, and only that is how we can understand the video or the brand video well, and we can generate the report, right? So basically in this project, right, so in this project, my Azure video indexer, it will turn that raw video into text. Okay, it will generate the transcript. Transcript means whatever is said within the advertisement, and it will also perform OCR. OCR is nothing but the text that appears on the screen, right? For example, if you look at the Garnier advertisement, so you can see the Garnier word appears on the screen, right? So all of that will be extracted using what? Using Azure Video Indexer. And my Azure Video Indexer will be only able to access the video when I store that in Azure Blob Storage. Okay, I hope this is very clear now. Okay, next part is Azure OpenAI. Okay, you can again look at this part as you can again look at the architecture. This is Azure OpenAI is also the part. Azure OpenAI is nothing but accessing the model, right? Which is in this case the LLM, which is GPT-4o. And for embedding model, we're going to use text3 embedding small. This is the embedding model that we're going to use in our project. Okay. All right. And what will Azure OpenAI do? You can also think of this as the brain of the project. Okay. So it will basically take the data from the video. All right. And it will compare against the rules that are mentioned in the PDF. And basis that, it is going to generate the report, and the output will be binary, either pass or fail. And if it fails, it will also tell you what went wrong. Okay. If you look at the other component, okay, if you just go back to the architecture, there is also something called as Azure AI Search. Okay. And Azure AI Search is nothing but you can think of this as a vector DB service. Okay, you can just think of this as what? As a vector DB service. This is nothing but a smart search engine. Okay, that can index the documents. Okay, and find specific information. Okay, it will do what? It is like a smart search engine that is going to index the documents. It is going to find the specific information. Okay, and how will it find this specific information? Using keywords, which is also called as keyword search, or it can also use vector embeddings or vectors, embeddings, vectors, whatever you like to call it. Okay. And in this particular project, this Azure AI Search will act as the knowledge base. Okay, it will act as what? It will act as knowledge base. Okay, and we're going to store the PDFs that we have here. Okay, so which are the PDFs? The two rule books that we have. We're going to store these PDFs in Azure AI Search. Okay, so my AI can look up the specific laws that are mentioned in the PDFs. Okay, so if you look at the vector search that we're going to use. So we're actually going to use hybrid vectors or hybrid vector search. Why hybrid? Because we're going to be dependent on keywords and we're also going to be dependent on embeddings. Keywords, because I want to look for that particular specific keyword, because when it comes to legal documents, that specificity is very important, right? And we're also going to be dependent on vectors and embeddings. Okay, so this entire process will be taken care by Azure AI search. Okay, if you go back to the architecture, you will find one more component which is called as, in the observability part, you will find something called as Azure Application Insights. Okay, and what it does is basically, this is nothing but the entire job of Azure Application Insights is monitoring. Okay, it is going to monitor the running algorithm. Okay, it is basically going to track the errors, it is going to track the latency, it is going to track the user activity, all of that. So whatever interaction the user is having with this agentic workflow, Azure Application Insights is going to track all of that. Okay, and actually in the end it also generates something called as live maps. This is something that you have to go on Azure and check. Okay, it also generates live maps. Okay, and it also checks if the audit fails or it takes too long. Okay, this tool tells us exactly which step, database, AI, or video, what caused the problem. Okay, so Azure Application Insights will also tell us what caused problems and where, because we're doing monitoring, right? So this is what will help us track it. Okay, and we'll be also using LangSmith. LangSmith is used for observability. LangSmith typically does somewhat similar job as that of Azure Application Insights. Okay, because we are using LangGraph, LangSmith can be an excellent tracker. Okay, and what does it track? It basically tracks the chains of the AI thought. So it basically tracks the chains of thought, exactly showing what was sent to the LLM and what came back. So what information was sent to the LLM and what response it generated. So that this is also something that you can track using LangSmith. Okay, so let's say for example, if AI gives us a wrong answer, we can check LangSmith to see if it retrieved a wrong rule or the prompt instructions were confusing. Yeah, so these are the important components that we will be using in our project. So just to let you know, on the Azure components that we'll be using, we will be using Azure storage account. Okay, so we'll be using what? We'll be using Azure storage account, and this storage account is nothing but it is going to hold the video files. Okay, I'm just going to summarize it here. And then I'm going to use Azure OpenAI, which is nothing but the LLM plus embeddings. Okay, which is typically used for thinking and reasoning, right? And then I'm going to use Azure AI search. Okay, Azure AI search is what? It is basically going to remember the PDF data. Okay, it is going to vectorize, it is going to do all of that. And then we have Azure Application Insights. Okay, and Azure Application Insights is what? It is nothing but it is going to perform monitoring, health check, logs, all of that. And then I also have LangSmith, which is nothing but it is going to track the thought process of my video, thought process of my agentic workflow. So these are the components that we will be using throughout. Okay, and yeah, obviously we are also going to use Azure Video Indexer, right? We'll be also using Video Indexer, which is basically going to analyze the video and it is going to extract extract the important parts. So what it is going to perform, it is basically going to work with transcript along with the OCR. So this is the infra part of my architecture. On the agentic part, we are going to use LangGraph. Okay, All right, guys. So that was about the understanding of the project. Now let's go and start implementing.